Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quorum Podcast. This is where academic medicine meets remote, austere, and resource-limited areas.
Welcome back to the program. This is Aebhric OKelly. This week we are again with Rhod Jordan, who is a remote paramedic working in Kurdistan and is the Quorum student representative. Rhod, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Aebhric. Thanks very much for having me back on, chap.
So tell us a bit about yourself and what's been keeping yourself busy.
Well, I'm still very much the same, a little bit jaded, a little bit cynical, but getting through another day in sunny Kurdistan. I'm a UK paramedic by background and have spent the vast majority of my career working in various lovely scenic spots around the world.
And you're currently in Kurdistan.
I am indeed, yeah. I'm into my last couple of days of this hitch. And very much looking forward to getting back to some UK weather, a little bit of damp, a little bit of grey, but plenty of greenery, I hope.
Was it 45 at the moment?
We've actually dropped down. We're a very calm 35 today. Autumn or fall, as you like to call it, is very much upon us now. So the fleece is coming out before the sun comes out.
So you have irons in many fires, Rhod, but at the moment you're looking at the MERP, the Medical Emergency Response Plan. Tell us a bit about this. Why is this your favorite iron in the fire at the moment, and what are you planning to do with it?
Well, as you know, things are quite interesting in our region at the moment. So I've recently been revisiting our current site medical emergency response plan and making sure that it remains fit for purpose. The writing of emergency plans, it tends to be one of those softer skills for the remote medic. An awful lot of the courses that we attend are very much focused on the hard clinical skill aspects of the job. And actually, as you know yourself, an awful lot of what we do is admin-based, is plan writing, exercising those plans, reviewing those plans in light of lessons learned, and trying to make them fit for purpose.
Yeah, everyone likes to focus on the sexy stuff, the trauma, but being a remote medic, you seldom get to see that. It is water testing, it is food testing, and it's emergency planning.
Yeah, very much so. And certainly when I stepped into the remote site work sort of a couple of decades ago, went out on my first gig and somebody turned to me within the first couple of days and said, right, we need a MERP. And I kind of looked at this person blankly, and they looked back at me with slightly raised eyebrows, and we eventually got an explanation of what it was they required. So it was a reaching out to my network then and saying, guys, girls, I've been asked to write this thing called a MERP, a Major Emergency Response Plan, and what goes into that? So after a bit of a round robbing and a garnering of ideas and inputs from elsewhere, over time, I've developed a framework that I've used and I've shared quite widely over the years because it seems to work. It seems to tick the boxes.
All right, give us an overview of the MERP.
So essentially, your medical emergency response plan, your MERP, as we'll talk about through the rest of the podcast, it should be a detailed strategy that's created to efficiently handle medical emergencies in all sorts of different locations. Depending on the size of your location, it's going to depend on the size of your MERP. But your main headings, your content thereof, really shouldn't change regardless of whether you're on an expedition, a deployment, or a rotation within the extractive industry, for example. Within that, it's going to include the various steps, responsibilities, and the resources needed to quickly and hopefully efficiently respond to emergencies and prevent harm to people's health and safety, which is ultimately what we're there for.
I'm surprised that this isn't taught in the offshore medics course. Is this something that we need to introduce to our own bachelor's remote paramedic program?
I'd certainly suggest that. It needs to be touched on. One of my other pet subjects, soapboxes to get on is around the medical intelligence assessment, so your pre-deployment work. So that's certainly been picked up on by lots of training providers and educational establishments. But I think very few that I'm aware of, anyway, would go into any kind of framework for the MERP itself.
So tell us about the MERP. How does this work and what's involved in it?
So really we want to consider the potential medical emergencies in that assessing and planning phase, so before we're hit with it. Need to carry out risk assessments to evaluate the possibilities and seriousness of different emergencies. And really, you don't want to be a one-person band when you're doing this. You want a team of professionals from all the various disciplines, so you can have a bit of a Chinese parliament, for want of a better phrase, and then out of that you can flesh out the meat on the bones of your MERP. So probably makes sense at this point if I run through some of the headings that I would personally include. We want a structure, we want a framework. We're medics and we like to think algorithmically, so we'll knock through in order what should be within our MERP. And this is purely from my own experience and point of view, so please don't take this as tablets of stone. So we want to look at assessment and planning. Within assessment and planning, identify the potential medical emergency relevant to our setting. We want to conduct RAs, risk assessments, to determine the likelihood and severity of the various emergencies, and establish that multidisciplinary emergency response team who are going to have to go out, develop, and ultimately implement this plan on the ground. So that would be number one. We also want to look at our emergency communications. You read any post-incident report from anywhere in the world, and communication is always going to be the prime bit that falls down. So emergency comms, develop your protocols for alerting the appropriate personnel and authorities in case of a medical emergency. Establish clear comms channels, phone systems, two-way radios, or other communication tools. You're going to have to look at this on an individual site, task-specific basis. And another bit that tends to get overlooked is then providing training on how to effectively communicate during emergencies. We can be quite good at passing out the VHF handhelds without actually teaching people a proper VP or voice procedure. One of the things that will come under the emergency comms is something called a PACE plan, which a lot of folks will have heard of. So we have our primary, our alternate, our contingency, and our emergency forms of communication. So we always try and have that plan A, B, C, and D, if you like, going through. Then the emergency procedures themselves. Create a step-by-step procedure for responding to those specific medical emergencies that we identified in our RAs, our risk assessments, such as can be that basic day-to-day cardiac arrest, severe allergic reactions, traumatic injuries, etc. Clearly define the roles and responsibilities of each member of the response team. When the bad thing happens, that's not the time to be assigning roles to people. And include your first aid providers, your professional medical personnel, and your administrators, your note takers that are going to be on scene as well. Within the emergency procedures, I would include instructions on evacuations of specific areas, and that therefore ensuring the safety of all individuals on site. So even if they haven't got a specific role within the MERP, they should at least be aware of what their evacuation routes are. Moving on from there, let's talk about training and education. Provide regular training sessions that are pertinent to the various staff members and groups on recognising and responding to medical emergencies. What do we expect them to do when the bad thing happens? It's also nice, and I found this a lot working overseas, offer certification courses in first aid and CPR and other relevant day-to-day skills. Stop the bleed courses as it goes down a storm here. They absolutely love that. And people like to walk away with a piece of paper, a bit of recognition that they've undertaken some learning, maybe above and beyond their current job role. You need to conduct drills and simulations to practice your emergency response procedures and improve your readiness. It might look like the most fantastic plan on paper. You've spent days, weeks, and months putting this thing together, fancy graphs, maps, and charts. But as we all know, most plans do not survive first contact with the enemy. So you do need to practice these things and see where they fall down. And be open and honest. Be mature enough to see holes in your own plan and go back and try and resolve them. Another area that can be overlooked, and I know I've been guilty of this myself in the past, Aebhric, is around equipment and supplies. Have you got adequate availability? Is there proper maintenance of the essential day-to-day med kit, such as AEDs, first aid kits, emergency medications? One of the things I found when responding to the COVID crisis back in 2020, and we were all stuck in various different parts of the world, people that were on regular medications had enough stock for their standard rotation of 4 or 5 weeks plus a little leeway, but what we weren't expecting was then to be stuck for 4 or 5 months. So we need to be building in that kind of thought process when we're doing our MERPs as well. So, stock adequate supplies of med consumables, your basics, your bandages, your gloves, day-to-day OTCs. And as I've alluded to on the COVID bit, establish procedures for being able to replenish those supplies. If you lose a major communications route, a bridge goes down, whatever it may be, how are you going to get your replen back to you? So that links into the next heading really within our MERP, which is the coordination with external resources. Because no project, no expedition is an island. We need outdoor support. So identify and establish relationships with local emergency services, hospitals, clinics, fellow medical professionals that live and work in the area on a regular basis. And, as I've alluded to before, do this before the bad thing happens. Develop formalised protocols for requesting assistance and coordinating with these external responders. Do that in advance, test them, build them into your regular exercises and drills. Make sure you exchange contact information, test it on a regular basis. This day and age, people like to change their phone handsets and quite often their phone numbers on a regular basis. So you really need to keep up to date with those. That seems to be the major change I make within MERPs these days, to be honest, people's personal phone numbers. And then the final one I would mention is document and evaluation. Because if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. So maintain thorough documentation of all medical emergencies, incident reports, patient assessments, outcomes, lessons learned, drill reports. It all feeds that PDSA cycle, that plan, do, study, act that we've talked about in previous podcasts. Conduct your debriefs after each emergency or exercise and identify those areas for improvement and update your plan accordingly. Yeah, there's no problem. Your drills and exercises are there to find out where things are going to fail before the bad thing happens. So regularly review, regularly update the plan to reflect changes in personnel, procedures, regulations, regional tensions. Yeah, geopolitics is big in this area at the moment. And what we're looking for is, at the end of the day, if we can follow a well-designed medical emergency response plan, you and the organisation can minimise the impact of medical emergencies. You can provide timely and appropriate care to those that we're in charge of taking care of and ensure the safety and well-being of everybody involved. And that, in a nutshell, is my take on the MERP. Back to
Brilliant.
you.
So I'm curious, and I have tons of questions. So
Go
on. For yourself,
Yes.
and the PACE plan is so important. So looking at COMO, so do you have a personal InReach SAT mini communication device for your own emergency COMO plan?
Yes, I do. So I've got the COMO plan, which is the organisations, and then I have my own individual one, depending on where I'm working, where I'm operating, what modes of transport I'm using, etc. So, I've always got my international mobile. I've always got a local mobile, 2 different networks. So I have a dual SIM on that. That's, I hate to use the phrase a burn phone, but that is a disposable old Nokia that the battery lasts 1,000 years. Yeah.
Nice.
I have a personal sat phone as well, which I just use recharge cards with. That lives in my go bag, my travel bag that goes everywhere with me and has done for donkey's years. And then I've got a couple of sort of too much detail personal locator emergency beacons built into various bits of kit.
So which sat commo device do you have?
Currently, I've got an old Thuraya, which I've had for donkey's years, and you can get them cheap as chips off various online selling sites these days. Recharge cards still available. I think the only thing I've done to it in the last 15, 20 years is put a new battery pack into it. But it's of a state. It works very nicely. It's reliable, but it isn't so expensive that if it got taken off me by a Keen's customs officer somewhere, I wouldn't have to remortgage the house or sell the children.
So there's no problem going into the Middle East with that device?
I would check each and every individual country. There's only 2 places that I've personally had issue carrying personal sat phone and GPS units. That was India and Somaliland. And those are the only 2 places that I've ever had a question raised over them.
Yeah, speaking of India, do not bring an ultrasound probe into India.
I've had issues taking a button-up swab somewhere, but that's a whole other story.
And for your own phone, do you use an eSIM that you can program for each country you go to?
No, I get local.
Fair enough. So, and talked about equipment supplies and resupply. Sure. So, in your current job, they take care of all of that, or do they resupply outside of herbal, or how does the resupply work for your current job?
So, on the consumable basis, it's a standing contract with a reputable medical services provider, and in turn, they hold contracts with suppliers in Europe and the UK. So I can pick up a UK catalogue if it's an item of hard equipment, pick out what it is that I require, give them the spec, and they can get that into country for me. Hard equipment lead time for this neck of the woods at the moment, you're probably looking at 6 to 8 weeks. As far as medications are concerned, whether it be CDs or whatever, then that's done on a monthly basis. And that's a call-off on-demand contract.
And since you're in Iraq, and no, I know it's Kurdistan, but technically it's an Iraq country, is there a problem with narcotics and ketamine and midazolam, or what are you allowed to have? So
there are certain things you can and can't do, as you quite rightly question. I'm in a very fortunate position that I have Kurdish Iraqi registered doctors within my medical team, so they can access and utilize a lot more of the narcotics, opioids than I can. So you really do need to be aware of what your local laws, regulations are, etc. And that's not just on the opioid side of life. You also need to look at that. Here there are very stringent rules around the use and holding of antivenoms, for example. So,
wow.
Yeah. So there's only certain medical establishments can actually legally hold anti.
Any other constraints you have with drugs?
Not particularly around drugs. There are with some of our other skills. So I'm still an old school UK paramedic. So I'm still allowed to do advanced airway and intubate. Whereas actually my Kurdish Iraqi doctors are not allowed to do advanced airway techniques. That's anesthesiologist only skill. So although their educational system, their med school is very much based on the UK framework, that is something that they don't touch. It's a specialist area.
In the time that you've been there, have you ever needed or heard of anyone needing to do advanced airways?
We have used supraglottics here, but as far as intubation, I've never done it here in Kurdistan. I've certainly done it elsewhere, such as West Africa and in Asia. But no, fortunately, I've never had to do it out here.
Yeah, you've worked some very interesting countries when you were working at XMed, weren't you?
Yeah, predominantly. If they write a Lonely Planet guide to the place, I probably don't go there.
Yeah, and we met in XMed. So you were running the training team in XMed at the Manor, at the Pengethley Manor outside of Hereford. 15 years ago, I think. And
yes,
I popped in to do guest teaching.
That's right, mate. Yeah, that is rolling back the years, isn't it? Yeah, because I've been away from there since end of 2013. So yeah, we are going back a few years, mate.
It's been a day or so.
It has. It's just showing on our waistlines these days.
Indeed. So going back to your 7 topics on your MERP. So we talked about resupply, and drugs is definitely an issue. Let's talk about coordination with external resources. And for me, looking and trying to find good hospitals, good clinics, good places in austere environments where you can connect with evidence-based practices has been a challenge. And we're lucky enough in all our 25 hospitals that we have signed agreements with in sub-Saharan Africa, we've got good ones. And so what is your criteria? So let's talk about where you are in Erbil and the relationships you have with the hospitals and clinics there.
Right. Well, I'm currently an awful long way from Erbil, about 4.5, 5 hour road move. So my nearest big city with really good hospitals would be a place called Sulemania, or Sully for short, where there are some fantastic facilities, great cardiac care units, stroke units, BIRS units, and the same for Erbil based on past experience. And I've used hospitals in both places for both national and expat staff with some fantastic outcomes. Some really, really good patient-centered care takes place. I mean, one of the things you need to do within your medical intelligence assessment and when you're developing your MERP is to actually physically go out and audit the facilities you intend to use and send your people to. And I think my basic rule of thumb is always going to be, would I be happy being treated there myself? Would I be happy if it was one of my 2 beloved sons that needed to go in there and receive treatment? And if I can't answer yes to that, it won't get used. If you can set up a really good remote site clinic, an awful lot of the time you'll find in that remote austere setting that you're far more capable than a lot of the local infrastructure. So rather than poo-pooing that, if you're in a position to, I open your door and build those relationships. Probably more back when I was doing more sort of expedition and NGO type work in my career. Once getting out on the ground to check my MIA, to check my MERP, I would physically go and see and visit any local facilities, build some individual relationships, actually getting eyes on as compared to what you might see online when you're putting your MIA together. It speaks volumes. Once you can actually touch it, feel it, smell it, it could well change your opinion of whether you're going to use it or not. And again, harking back to those sort of expedition NGO days, if you're going in on a time-limited project, go in, do your stuff. You've built your relationships with the clinic. If you're going to want some mutual aid, perhaps you can, at the end of your trip, your rotation, say, right, well, when we leave, I will donate to you any and all of the medications that I haven't used. So, that's just a nice way of opening doors for you and perhaps building bridges for whoever comes after you on the next trip.
So with your decades of experience, you can walk into a district hospital or a clinic and you get this sense of whether or not this is going to meet the standard. What advice do you have for the new medic to have? Is there a checklist? Is there a WHO standard of what a clinic should have? How can somebody who just finished their paramedic program, their offshore medics program, and now they're working in an austere environment. What is there a checklist to go through to see that this hospital does meet the standard?
Well, in this day and age, the simple answer is yes, Aebhric. There are various checklists, guidelines, and frameworks that you can just download, use those, and they can be fairly simple one-siders, right up to multi-page documents, depending obviously on the size of the facility and on what services they're potentially offering. If you're in the extractive industry, oil and gas per se, then there are internationally published standards of what a clinic should contain, whether it's a role 1, 2, 3 or a tier 1, 2, 3, depending on whoever's grading system you want to use. So there are international guidelines out there. There are some very widely recognised frameworks to utilise now. But again, it is going to be for the newbie very much, you need to have to go and do your research and then walk the walk. You've got to get boots on the ground. You've got to get your eyes on it. And all the checklists in the world aren't going to answer all those questions for you. So there is an element of learning on the job, but probably not quite as bad as it was a couple of decades ago.
This is something I've done even on holiday, walking in and just wanting to see what the local hospital's like out of curiosity and passion. And after a while, you can walk into a place and you see dust bunnies in the corner. And you're like, this isn't gonna, and you have, it's a feeling, but this can only come from checklist. And I hadn't had that in the 80s and 90s starting out. I'm sure you didn't either.
No.
But there's checklists from WHO, from NATO, I suppose. What rating system do you use? Do you use the NATO Role 1, Role 2, Role 2E as far as standardizing your hospitals?
I tend to, because within the fraternity that I work within, that's an accepted and understood framework. So there's commonality of terminology, so that always helps, obviously. It's horses for courses again. You're going to have to gauge it on where you are and where you're working. Another great place to go for that kind of information is the United Nations. They have some fantastic publications, open source, available online for what different levels of med facilities should contain, right down to skill levels of personnel, how many band-aids you should have in the cupboard, etc., etc. So that's a good resource to look at as well.
Let's talk about documentation and handovers. Mm-hmm. Do you use the ATMIS report?
Yes, absolutely, ATMIS report. So passing information from scene, one of the things I always introduce is the standardized methane format, which I think most of the listeners should be familiar with. If they're not, there's no excuse. Go and look it up, find out. ATMIS for handover, yeah, absolutely across the board. I mean, in my cargo pocket now, I've got a small little flip chart of my aid memoir cards. One of those is a write-on ATMIS card. So even sort of 30 years in the game, probably because I've been 30 years in the game, I don't rely on my memory. So quick notes on the card when it comes to handover. It's nicely formulated. When you're trying to think of a squillion things at once on scene, that using group cards, it's not cheating at all. I like to see people using aid memoirs, group cards, whatever you want to call them.
There's no cheating in medicine. Always have something to refer to. Absolutely,
mate. Absolutely. It's all well and good writing on the back of your glove, but again, yeah. So we've moved past those days, I hope.
So building on that, so having that information, how do you pass that on? And there's now more a tablet-based, app-based, ATMIS handover documents, and that will have a electronic copy. How does it work in your system?
I am old school in my current setting, so very much a paper-based system. That has worked best for us, and that is because we just can't afford to be wholly technologically reliant for various operational reasons.
Well, to be fair, you're in the desert, and sand doesn't do well with electronics at all, does it?
No, not in the slightest, as I found out with my rather fancy Bluetooth speaker a couple of weeks ago, which is no longer very fancy Bluetooth speaker.
So this is a challenge that is faced everywhere, is trying to maintain that patient data, making sure that you're not doing HIPAA violation or other loss of that information, and making sure that goes along with the patient. And one thing I saw in Jordan was they had an electronic copy, and they would put it into a USB that slapped onto your wrist. It was this kind of a metal bracelet that had a USB attachment. And I thought that was clever that they're doing that. That was as a critical care transport level, but in one hospital, they were downloading the patient's information, slapping it onto the wrist, and then when handing it over to the new facility is there. You talked about establishing your team. So you're the solo medic. Is that right?
I'm not on this particular one. I'm blessed with having quite a large multidisciplinary team. So I have doctors and nurses and MAs and even a pharmacist amongst them. And EMTs manning ambulances. So I've got quite the circus.
So what is your team development? Do you give them all up to ACLS level, PHTLS level, or what is your training baseline?
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier on, I mean, all the doctors and the nursing staff follow very much a UK model of university education. So you've got a really, really good baseline. So then it's what I like to build on is just on those alphabet courses that you've mentioned. So on ACLS, the AHA, American Heart Association, courses are very much available in the region, very well recognised. So we can do in-house training on that. And then the docs and the nurses can go off to Erbert or Sully and actually sit the AHA certified exams, which is great for them. PHTLS, ITLS, and other courses we can deliver. So one of the areas that we've definitely been building on and developing is that pre-hospital trauma care. That is something they really don't get any exposure to in any kind of pre-hospital environment. So even the docs and the nurses that have worked within an ED or an ER department in this neck of the woods, they will never have done that outside the hospital building without having a full team around them. So to take these folks and then put them in individual scenario situations where it's like, right, you are the sole medic now. It is just your backpack. What are you going to do for this person? That's quite a shift in mindset for them. So teaching the skills element of that, not an issue. These are intelligent, switched on professionals, but it's that shift in thought process to you no longer have a team around you. You're it. That's the biggest transition point.
And do you introduce prolonged field care concepts, or are you turfing off your casualty very quickly to a Role 2 hospital?
No, the PFC is another one of my soapboxes, Aebhric. So, and we have to build that in because of where we are, not just as in a remote site, but the extremes of weather that we face, from 50 plus in the summer to torrential monsoon type rains in the winter, to snow and ice, which can close off mountain roads, wash out bridges, which regularly happens, let alone any changes in security footprint in the area. You can end up having to hold your patients in the field for hours, days, however long it may take to to resolve the situation. I mean, we have no access to rotary or fixed wing assets here. So if you're moving anybody, it's on four wheels. So yeah, PFC concepts, nursing care that goes alongside that. It's a big one. And again, for our, particularly for our doctors here, that's something that they have never been exposed to before they meet me.
Are they receptive to it? Are you bringing those concepts onto your training schedule?
They are receptive, and I think because it is new and to them really quite innovative, they lap it up. And it's like, can I have some more? Can you bring me this publication? Can you bring me that publication? And I'm always bringing journals and articles back with me to share with the team. And you can see some of it is kind of quite mind-blowing for them. But they're an absolute joy to work and live with because they are so open and receptive to new thought processes and new ideas.
Are you using Hitman sheep vomit to teach prolonged field care?
Of course I am.
Ah, good man.
I drink from the Coron Kool-Aid cup. Come on.
And the other thing is ultrasound. So, and it's a passion of mine. It always comes up. You knew this question was coming. So, what is your ultrasound use in your clinic?
I've got a butterfly IQ.
Go away. Well done.
Yeah, get in there. So, I think, grief. When did I do? I did the APUS with the college 18 months, 2 years ago. And I've done a couple of other POCUS courses in the meantime. And I came back here and I started banging the drum about it, and we should be doing this, and this is great, and this is ideal for this environment, blah, blah, blah. And then one of my colleagues from a nearby facility said, that sounds very much like a piece of kit I've got in a box in the back of the cupboard at my place. I was like, you're joking me. Can I have a look? So took a trundle out in the 4x, went and paid a coffee visit, and lo and behold, it got a butterfly in the back of the cupboard in the box unused. So
nice.
For the cost of a couple of coffees and some Oreo cookies, I got myself an ultrasound unit.
Nice. And what have you been using it for?
For exclusions mainly. So one of my three main doctors here is an orthopod, and I can't get it out of his hands. So nice. we get any sort of suspected orthopod related stuff. He's right in there, and it's great. It's really good, and you can imagine these folks have never seen anything of that size, that accuracy in a package like that ever before. So, kids at Christmas.
Well, we can talk about ultrasounds, we can talk about prolonged field care, but Rhod, what really impresses me is whenever I see pictures of you at work, there's cats.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but it doesn't matter where I go. I always seem to attract one. I don't know whether I was actually a witch in a past life. No, I do like to share my coffee with a quiet companion in the morning, and a cat Indeed. Seems to fit that bill, mate.
Well, Rhod, my final question for you is this. What advice do you have for the new medic, the new nurse, the new doc, who is just starting out on their career in austere medicine?
Be open, be receptive, get your information from multiple sources, cross-check it. Ultimately, we are still quite a niche profession, but we do swim in a relatively small gene pool. So if you're not sure about somebody or a piece of information, you can generally triangulate that with somebody within your network. And that is always worth doing. So have your champions, have your gurus, because they will help and assist, but make sure you choose them wisely.
Excellent advice. Rhod, it's great to hear from you, and the work you're doing with the college, as well as the work you're doing on the ground, is impressive. Thank you for leading in this austere environment.
Aebhric, it's always an absolute pleasure to speak, mate, and I look forward to catching up with you at the MIM conference in Malta early next year.
This has been a presentation from the College of Remote and Offshore Medicine. If you would like to earn CPD credits for this podcast, you can join the Council of Members. Being a member of the college gives you free CPD credit, free access to our virtual field guide, and discounts on our e-learning courses. You can join the team on our college website at quorum.edu.mt.